for quite long. The helicopter pilot saw the top of one of the fir trees, all snow-covered with a trace going down. We arrived in that area and found him. He was sitting there in his seat. Tests are quite a challenging period for an aircraft life, requiring confirmation of all data set and specifications. A lot of things happened. We had to artificially bring the aircraft into difficult modes, achieve crazy G-loads, to play, I would say, with a power plant, driving it into conditions when it had to fail. The tests were going with difficulties, as it was not often the case to test the totally new aircraft. As a rule, about 10 to 20% of the innovations are used. On that aircraft, everything was new. Nikolai Sadovnikov faced some specific situations. In one of the flights at extreme strength test modes, part of the aircraft wing was destroyed. The aircraft was turning and shaking at a very high speed, but he settled the aircraft down. Nikolai's high skill and self-control could be envied in this respect. As the song goes, he flew with one wing and a prayer. In 1982, we actually completed the main test stage. Everybody was satisfied with the results, though we had a lot of pressure to meet the time schedule. At that time, they could urge the people involved in the work, and that was a right thing to do. When the first stage of the test was over, military test pilots got involved into work. Extreme modes, again and again. In cooperation with the military, the most efficient layout of the cockpit instruments, devices, and switches was determined. A pilot must feel comfortable at all flight stages. There were some disputes as well. Up to now, a pilot performed ground wheel braking manually with an aircraft braking handle. We switched over to pedal braking. The pilots did not accept that. The unanimous response was no. They were all for the old braking procedure. Chirkin was the leading test pilot from the military. When he arrived, he said, "Just wait, I'll arrange my team." They had been discussing something for about an hour. We were not there. They squabbled and debated. He came out and said, "Don't change anything. You made it better." Alongside with the flights, ground tests were conducted. For a short run here on the ground, an aircraft was exposed to such loads that this fighter would experience during long years of its service life. The purpose of all tests is to find all the flaws, to find and to fix. In 1985, the fighters became operational in the Air Defense and Air Force squadrons. The Su-27 single-seat frontline fighter, aircraft length 21.9 meters, height 5.9 meters, wingspan 14.7 meters, maximum takeoff weight 28 tons, maximum flight speed 2,500 kilometers per hour, flight range 3,900 kilometers, service ceiling 18.5 kilometers, limiting G-load 9. The first comments of the Air Regiment's pilots confirmed the outstanding performance of the aircraft. With its combat efficiency, the Su-27 was superior to all previous Soviet fighters. We immediately got a feeling that this aircraft is simple and easy in flying. It has high maneuvering characteristics, and what is most important for a pilot are the new requirements for pilot physiology and physical capabilities. A pilot has to stand such G-loads so that to use all maneuvering characteristics of the aircraft. I remember at that time, I seemed to have been dreaming of a similar aircraft, but it appeared to have exceeded all my expectations and dreams. It was time for this fighter to become well known all over the world. In 1986, a special aircraft was prepared to set up world records. However, at that time, the Su-27 was still a classified fighter, and that special aircraft got the name P-42. We were told that the Su-27 name was not good for the record flights. Our program would be approved and signed, but the aircraft name should be changed. I proposed to take the first letter P of my father's name, Pyotr. During World War II, at the time of the Stalingrad battle, he worked at headquarters in a political department of the 66th Army and died there. It was 1942, the year of the victory in Stalingrad battle. The aircraft name was changed to P-42. Like any aircraft designed to set world records, the P-42 was stripped to minimum weight. It was made as light as possible. Even the paint was removed. This was common practice. The Americans did the same when their F-15 was setting rate of climb records. Moreover, they set up those records in wintertime, when at the low temperatures, the engines developed maximum thrust. Now it's worth mentioning another important feature of the fourth generation fighters, such as the Su-27 and the F-15. The thrust-to-weight ratio of these fighters is more than 1. That means that the engine thrust exceeds the aircraft weight. The power plant for the Su-27 aircraft was developed in the Arkhip Lyulka Design Bureau. By the time of its development, the Bureau had glorious chapters of history. The first Soviet turbojet engine was developed in the Design Bureau in 1941, before the Germans started to invade the USSR. After the World War II, the engine designers began to collaborate with the Sukhoi Design Bureau. Most of the Sukhoi aircraft were equipped with the AL Arkhip Lyulka engines. There are two AL-31F turbofan engines installed on the Su-27. Their total thrust in full afterburner is equal to 25 tons, while the aircraft normal weight is 23 tons. So the aircraft thrust-to-weight ratio is more than 1. As compared with the previous generation fighter, this parameter was 0.8. As to the special record aircraft, as soon as it became lightweight and the thrust was maximum augmented, its thrust-to-weight ratio at takeoff reached the value of 2. This enormous ratio led to a problem. The brakes couldn't hold the aircraft at the start. Therefore, the aircraft was tied with steel cables to a heavy tow truck. We selected an afterburner, but this tow tank couldn't hold the aircraft. Then we had to find a huge mountain bulldozer at the airfield. I don't know what it was doing there. The bulldozer plowshare rested against the tow tank with some props under it. And only this system could hold the aircraft when activating the afterburner. When the pilot activated afterburners, the cables were detached and the aircraft rocketed up into the sky. The aircraft was reaching the sound speed climbing vertically. From 1986 to 1988, the P-42 set up more than 30 world records. Test pilot Viktor Pugachev reached an altitude of 3,000 meters in less than half a minute. To be more precise, in 25.4 seconds. It is 2 seconds faster than the world record of the F-15. Whereas Nikolai Sadovnikov climbed to an altitude of 15 kilometers in his aircraft within 1 minute 16 seconds, which is 7 seconds faster than the Americans did. So the Su-27 was a winner in the first stage of the long-distance run against America. In the early 90s, the chance to perform demo aerial combats between the Su-27 and F-15 became real. In 1992, pilots of Lipetsk Aviation Center made a friendly visit to Virginia U.S. Air Force Base. The first air combat, we met and had a briefing who should fly to the tail first. It was agreed that first they are ahead of us, we are behind. They tried to maneuver, but nothing came of it. Then we changed the rules. I fly forward, and the American pilot, the squadron leader, is behind me. From this position, I have to fly away from him and go to his aircraft tail. Then was considered a victory. He is deliberately in a wonderful position with the only task to hold it. I drag him higher up, making an accelerated combat turn while climbing. He is following me, losing speed within the limits of less than 650 kilometers per hour. And then the Su-27 aircraft has a total advantage. After 1.5 turn, I fly to his tail. There is nothing that he can do. We later talked with the Americans. Their general flew the Su-27 two-seater with our general. When he got out of the aircraft, he was delighted. When we came up to him, he straightforwardly admitted, with his thumbs up, it was better than their F-15. Foreign specialists got their first impression of the new Soviet fighter exterior in 1977. In this picture, made from the American reconnaissance satellite, the smooth contours of the T-10 prototype airplane can be seen. But at that time, they couldn't get a clear and complete picture of the new aircraft. By the way, the NATO code name for the Su-27 is Flanker, which literally means flanking. The word is pragmatically neutral. It's just that under NATO classification, all Soviet fighters' names begin with the Latin letter F, which stands for fighter. In 1987, only 10 years later, the NATO pilots finally made detailed pictures of the Soviet flanker when these fighters began patrolling the open sea. Two years later, the Soviet Su-27 demonstrated its capabilities in the skies of Western Europe. In June 1989, the regular international air show took place in the French city of Le Bourget. To this day, the Soviets brought only civilian aircraft to international air shows. But in 1989, according to the new political course of the USSR leaders, considered it possible to demonstrate military aircraft as well, including the Su-27. The fighter was presented in two versions. One was a basic single-seat aircraft, and the other, Su-27UB, was a two-seat combat trainer. Both fighters flew non-stop from an airfield in Zhukovsky, Moscow region to Le Bourget. More than that, they flew without air refueling and external fuel tanks. This spoke volumes about the capabilities of the aircraft. As to demo flying, it was a real shock for all foreign aviation specialists. One of the maneuvers performed at Le Bourget by test pilot Viktor Pugachev was called Pugachev's Cobra. It's worth noticing that the Americans were the first to perform maneuvers similar to that one of Pugachev. It happened during F-14 fighter test flights in the early 70s. But the maneuver amplitude didn't exceed 90 degrees. When performing Cobra, it reaches up to 110 degrees.